My stepmother is the most diabolical woman I've ever come across. I've been really close to my father my entire life, and when she put me in the crosshairs between me and my dad, well, that's where I draw the line because you know what? I'm going to expose her for the liar that she is. If you asked any of my friends what my favorite show is, you'd likely get a unanimous Dynasty. I've rewatched every episode released about 1,000,000 times, and the chokehold Liz had on that throughout my adolescence cannot be overstated. That said, I was far from amused when my own life started resembling my favorite show. I've never been too far removed from Fallon Carrington. I was practically raised in my father's office. The family business runs deeper than blood, and I'm pretty sure I'm my father's only daughter. I attended the best schools on Daddy's dime, and I own that. I know what I have, and I also know that I've never really done anything to deserve it. I'd like to think what self-awareness I possess has led me to being less of a brat than, well, others. I don't have an older brother to be my moral compass like she does, nor have I really wanted one before this situation occurred. For the sake of privacy and also to indulge my Dynasty-devoted heart just a little bit, I'll be referring to the family business as Carrington Atlantic. My father and his brothers started Carrington Atlantic fresh out of college to prove my grandparents that they could do something with their lives. Well, they were right. All three brothers did really well for themselves. While my uncle decided to take their share of the profits and diversify, my father dedicated his life to Carrington Atlantic and made it what it is today. The company's changed quite a bit over the years, and it's definitely expanded in that time. But my father has always been at the helm, and ever since I can remember, I've been right beside him. We're not a flashy family. I did not attend every gala or get swept up in the glamour. Dad kept me in the background where I could watch how everything was done, and when I wasn't in school, I was reading over his shoulder in the office. Needless to say, I've never wanted to do anything else. I don't just want to have my name on the company. I want to know what makes it tick. Why do we do what we do? How do we do it? At every level, I wanted to know how exactly everything worked. So, I took my first internship with Atlantic in high school, and I did all the regular intern things, fetching coffee, taking notes, the busy work. It didn't matter that I was the boss's daughter, I was there to learn. Over the years, I've worked through a number of departments, and the second I graduated, I planted myself in the Strategic Communications department to learn more about the company than I already knew. I stayed there for a couple years before transferring to my current position in the finance department. To be clear, I'm qualified to be here thanks to my undergrad major, but I've learned a lot since joining too. Before we go into the current situation, I'd be useful to provide a quick background on the others involved in this. First of all, my father. My dad is my hero. My mother has never been present in my life, so the only parent I've ever known is my dad. Despite being more than married to his work, he was an amazing father. He always made sure that I had everything I needed, and he prioritized raising me to know the value of everything I was given, despite the sheer abundance that I grew up by and was surrounded with. He had worked for everything he had, and though I was born with so much, I would have to work to earn my keep as well. He attended every play and tournament that he could. He never missed a chance to give me a new experience, and he never made me feel overlooked when he got remarried and had more kids. When his wife passed away, he never let himself be too consumed by grief to be there for his children. I was happy for him when he began a new relationship a couple years ago. I wanted my father to have someone beside him to grow old with, but I was not ecstatic about who he chose. Crystal. Crystal was a new hire of the Strategic Communications Department about a year after I joined. She had a lot of experience in the field and glowing preferences. She wasn't my direct superior at the time, but she took on a senior role. I didn't really pay her any attention than I would any other coworker until the Christmas gala, where she spent basically the entire night flirting with my father. Evidently, he saw something in her because they began a relationship. Shortly after, they announced not merely an engagement, but their elopement at the very same Christmas gala the next year. If the fact that I've chosen to call her Crystal tells those of you who have seen the show anything, I don't like her. I'll keep it brief, but we don't get along. I don't really think she's a fan of any of my father's children, but she can avoid my siblings easily enough during the school year. I, on the other hand, well, have to see her every day at work and every week at family dinners. I never allowed our distaste for each other to deter me from having a cordial relationship. However, seeing as I was determined to be happy for my father, if that meant shutting my mouth when he married a woman more than 2 decades younger than him and less than a decade older than me, then I would do it. The reason that establishing all of this is important is because I wanted to be crystal clear that I would never do anything to hurt my father or the business. I'll put up with Crystal if that's what makes him happy, and I'll give my all to the business because he already has. Unfortunately, I don't think the same can be said of Crystal. Despite her recent promotion to the head of the Strategic Communications Department, I've always felt that she cared more about securing her position as Miss Carrington than her position in the business. Recently, I was alerted to a discrepancy regarding the transfer of some funds. More specifically, funds allocated to certain campaigns run by the Strategic Communications Department. It's been deposited into the wrong account. Now, it's not entirely unheard of for a transfer to be mishandled, but things like that are typically sorted out quickly and with an incident report submitted to finance. Neither of those things happened. To shy away from saying anything more specific, I can tell you that an investigation was launched on the down low. If funds were being misused, we wanted to make sure to get the whole story before throwing around any accusations or spooking any potential culprits. Considering the nature of the incident and, well, the clearance needed to complete the transactions, there is rather limited suspect pool. Considering how I've laid out the information in this post so far, I imagine that you've come to an accurate conclusion. Crystal is among one of the suspects. She is unfortunately one of the main suspects because her level of access and clearance, her location during key times, and her proximity to the campaigns whose funds were mishandled all point to her being the most likely culprit. Normally, at this stage of an investigation, we would take our findings to a higher up and wait for instructions on how to move forward. I don't know if I can do that, not in this instant, considering my findings currently point to my father's wife being the culprit. I've kept this as low-key as I possibly can, with only my direct supervisors aware of my findings, but neither of us have any idea what to do. I know that turning to you guys, of all places, is kinda stupid. You're strangers. But considering I can't ask anyone around me for advice, this is the best I've got. I've scrubbed this post of any usable information, so it's unlikely that I'll ever be linked back to me, unless my supervisor decides to read this himself. On one hand, I feel almost vindicated that she's a suspect. I've never liked her, and this feels like a belated justification. On the other hand, she represents our family. If this does end up being her, not only will it affect the reputation of our family, but of our business. What will the shareholders think? More than anything, though, she's my father's wife. Regardless of what I think of her, he loves her. Her guilt will destroy him, and I don't want to be the one, to do that to him. I'm not really expecting any useful advice to come from this. I think I just want to feel like I'm actually telling someone about it instead of bottling it all up. I want the best for the business, but I also want the best for my father, and right now, those two goals are at odds end with each other. Update number 1. Before I get into the meat of this update, and trust me, there's a lot to unpack, I'd like to start off by thanking everyone who commented on my original post. I know I said that I was posting mainly to vent, but your comment seriously helped me feel like I was doing more than just screaming into the void. Well, with everything that's happened since I really appreciated being able to read through the comments that not only believed me, but treated me like a real human being. Thank you. On to the less pleasant part of this update. It goes without saying that I proceeded with the investigation after my post. My hope was to find any evidence that pointed to a suspect other than Crystal being responsible, so I didn't have to tell my father that his wife was involved in such a scandal of this magnitude. And I really thought that I've managed that when we found more transactions dating back a few months, all linked to the account of a different employee. Sure, the employee in question was Crystal's assistant, but I was hoping that the link would mean, it's nothing. Well, they said that hope breeds eternal misery for a reason. I stated in my original post that I had worked with Strategic Communications Department for some time before transferring to the Finance Department. I'd worked very briefly with Crystal's assistant at the time, but considering he's been brought on along with Crystal, I didn't know him too well. Still, I was comfortable enough to be the one to conduct what I'll refer to as an interrogation, but what was posed as a necessary step for us to proceed with our investigation. Ideally, he would not have known that he or Crystal were suspects of any wrongdoing. Every piece of information that we collected pointed to Crystal. Without revealing any more specific information, the interview pending the data needed to back up his statement pretty definitely pointed to Crystal. We were able to find out that the transactions were basically hush money to keep silent on the fact that Crystal had been leaking company documents regarding upcoming campaigns to an external party. The reason that this is important is because the campaigns were regarding partnerships that had not yet been confirmed or announced, and that would involve a significant expansion of the scope of Carrington Atlantic. The final investors' meeting regarding said partnership has not taken place yet. Again, the data that we did have, it backed up the assistant's claims, but we were also making sure to back up everything. However, with the investors' meeting coming up, I wanted to make sure to address this as quickly as I could. I cannot emphasize enough how big of a deal it was that everything went according to plan, and this sort of interference could cost the company so much money, time, and resources that we've spent years recuperating. As such, I decided to go to my father with what I had and send, the rest of the data when I confirmed it. Unfortunately, Crystal beat me to it. Meeting with her assistant must have spooked her, because by the time I arrived at my father's house to talk, he was already waiting for me. He told me that we had nothing to speak about, that I was a disgrace to the company and to our family. Crystal was beside him through it all, going as far as to tell him that, OP is the mole. He wouldn't hear a word I had to say, especially after I accused her of being a liar. He would not even let me into the house. He told me that he never wanted to see or hear from me again, and if I knew what was good for me, I would not try to contact anyone at the company either. He kicked me out of my childhood home, because he believed a woman he's known for a fraction of the time that he's known his own daughter. I'm in my apartment right now, and I don't think I've really processed what just happened. My supervisor's the only person who can back up my story, but I don't want to risk contacting him while my father is in this mode. I've contacted a private investigator who's done some work for me in the past, but I don't really know what he'll be able to find out without access to the company records. I hope I can figure this out, I just don't know how. Update number 2. Hey guys, I'm going to keep this brief. I don't give away too much information, but now this will not be my final update. I finally have something that might get my father to hear me out. I mentioned in my last post that I've engaged a private investigator that I've worked with before. I asked him to look into Crystal and give a brief rundown of things to look out for. Anything that linked her to the external party that might benefit from the leaking of our campaign information would help. Guys, he managed to photograph her meeting with the CEO. Once again, not the real names, but the CEO of Colby Enterprises, Jeff Colby. For those of you who have not seen Dynasty, Jeff Colby's the biggest rival of Carrington Atlantic. True to his moniker, Jeff Colby and Colby Enterprises as a whole is our biggest competitor. While both companies did not start off very similar, our individual expansions through the years had led to a significant overlap in our target markets. Crystal being linked to Jeff Colby was huge. If he were the one that she was leaking our data to, my father would never forgive her. My PI managed to get photographs of Crystal and Jeff out at dinner together on 3 separate occasions, and even a series of her arriving at his house and not leaving until the next day in a different outfit. Crystal clearly knew Jeff, and they were clearly doing more than having a quick chit-chat. This wasn't something that could be brushed off. Before I could present any of this to my father, though, I was informed that he would be filing charges against me for breaching my employee contract and confidentiality agreement by leaking sensitive information to an external party. The charges did not specify an exact external party, but I imagine the official filings would. I was then informed that I would have to engage my legal counsel, as our family lawyer could not represent me in the case. Even though it may sound stupid to some of you, I haven't yet sought out any legal counsel. I'm hoping that I won't have to go so far as to contact a lawyer for this. With the pictures from my private investigator, I believe that I have enough to get to my father. I have enough to request access to data to support my claims, and if I can get him to hear me out for just a moment, I'll be able to lay out the details of everything that's happened, without risking a huge scandal for the company. We can't risk word of a potential data leak getting out, not before our investors' meeting. I don't think he's considering the potential ramifications of a case against me going public. I think that Crystal's probably just in his ear about me betraying him, and I think he's letting himself be swept up in his emotions enough to just listen to her. I'm determined to sort this out before this whole mess gets any bigger than it needs to be. For our company and for my father. Update number 3. I ended my last update on what I thought was a hopeful note. I had the images of Crystal and Jeff, and I thought those would be enough to get my father to hear me out, but it was not. I knew that going to him at the company would only result in a team of security guards escorting me out if I even managed to get into the building, so I didn't bother trying to meet him there. Instead, I waited until I knew Crystal wasn't home to go to the house. I knew he would not let me in, so I used the side door that the maids used to get in. There was something distinctly wrong about sneaking into a house that I'd snuck into a million times as a teenager, but this time I was a fully grown adult and unwelcome. My dad was in the study, which wasn't really a surprise considering he spent my whole life and most of his in there. He didn't react as strongly to my presence as I thought he would. He wasn't angry, he didn't scream, and I thought this was a good sign, and he told me that he figured that I would try something like this, that even though I was all grown up, my habits have never really changed. He says that that's why he was so caught off guard by what I've done. That's why he was so hurt that I had to turn against him. It was clear that he's decided what had happened, but I was determined to change his mind. I told him that I had pictures to show him that would convince him that I was not a liar. It was Crystal. He said that he knew I never liked Crystal, but he hoped that I'd be willing to accept that she had a place in his life despite that. He would not hear me out when I said this wasn't some elaborate plan against Crystal, and, well, that she was framing me. He told me that his lawyers had thought it best that we had no contact leading up to the trial. A trial? He was actually going through with the charges against me? He wasn't willing to hear me out. He wasn't even willing to look at the pictures that would prove to him that Crystal wasn't as innocent as she was claiming to be. He simply asked me to leave, and I did. I left the folder of pictures on a chair in his study and I left. Leaving did not mean I'm giving up, though. I contacted my supervisor, despite my father warning me against contacting anyone in the company. But he's currently on the other side of the world with his own father who's dying. Obviously, that takes precedence for him. So I'm on my own here. Despite that, I'm not going to sit by silently while Crystal drives my father and our company to ruins. I could handle this in court as he wants to. I know that the discovery process would dig up all the data needed to prove me right, but I'm not going to let it get that far. If he doesn't want to listen to me in private, so be it, but he will listen to me, whether he likes it or not. He's going to hear me out. If I have to make a scene to save the company, I will. The investors' meeting is coming up, and I'm not going to let it go without sorting this out once and for all. Update number 4. I can definitely say that this will be the final update of the post. What I'm going to describe below is an abridged version of everything that's taken place since my last update. I said that I wasn't going to let this situation get any further than it already has, and I meant it. The day that I went to see my father at his house was 4 days before the investors' meeting, meant to finance a partnership that would see a significant expansion to Carrington Atlantic. Needless to say, it was an important meeting where the heads of various departments would be present, Crystal included. Very sensitive information would be discussed, and I could not risk Crystal leaking any more than she already had, or our investors finding out about the leak. Obviously, I had been barred from not only attending the meeting, but from the premises as a whole since the whole kicking me out incident occurred. I did not let that deter me, not from showing up early in the morning to get my father to listen. If there's one thing my father values, it's discretion. It's why I've been handling this in the way that I've been, but I knew that To get through to him, I would have to push the boundaries a bit. He'd shut me down twice in private, but this time I would not give him a chance to. Like a scene from my favorite show. I called him out into the lobby of the building as he arrived. It was early enough that there wasn't an obscene amount of people around, but a number of the department heads set to attend the meeting later the day arrived and didn't really question me when I asked them to hang around for a moment. When my father arrived with Crystal in tow, I'd already passed around a new folder of images of Crystal and Jeff, along with documents outlining the claim I was making against her. With so many others wanting to know exactly what was going on, he had no choice but to look at the documents and the picture. Of course, after doing so, he asked Crystal what's going on. She said nothing, but I wasn't in the mood to stay silent. I informed him that she's been leaking information to our biggest competitor, likely because she was having an affair with their CEO. I figured that was most likely an explanation for the dinners and nights spent at his house, but her shouting in her own defense caught even more off guard. Get this. Jeff Colby wasn't her boyfriend. He was her brother. Everyone was shocked. Even I had not imagined that they were linked to that extent. Clearly, my father was unaware of this detail too, but Crystal tried to say that they only recently reconnected after being separated as kids, and that she had not leaked anything to him. So I asked her to call him if she had nothing to hide. Call him, put him on speaker, and let my father speak to him. He'd corroborate her story and everyone would believe her. For the first time in weeks, my father actually agreed with me. The second Jeff answered the phone, Crystal's story was blown out of the water. The very first thing he did was ask if the investors' meeting was starting soon and why she had not sent over the data she promised the day before. He told her he would not be transferring her a single dollar until, she gave him the promised data. She hung up before he could do anything else, but the damage was done. My father had security hold her while we discussed the details in private. After promising the department heads that we would have a debriefing soon, the investors' meeting was delayed temporarily while I finally accessed the data needed to prove Crystal's involvement. My father will be dropping any charges against me and will instead be building a case against Crystal and all those involved in the data leak. I'm looking forward to that day, that she faces justice for the actions both against the company and against me. Final update. I know. I said the previous update was the last one, but I've gotten a lot of comments asking for some clarification, so I figured I'd put your minds to rest with this final update. A lot of you were wondering if my father ever apologized for kicking me out of both my childhood home and the company. Well, essentially by, barring me from returning to work or contacting any of my coworkers, he did, and initially I was not willing to accept his apology. I didn't give up because I valued our family and our company above all else, but in the wake of it all, knowing that he was willing to take her side without even hearing me out puts a big strain on our relationship. We're working on it, and his insistence on making it up to me is beginning to convince me to give, coming back a chance, but I'm as of yet undecided. The whole situation just left a bad taste in my mouth, but I'm glad that regardless of what could have happened, I seem to have come out largely unscathed while Crystal's going to be sued to high hell. I'm now willing to say in no uncertain terms that I've never liked her, was never going to like her, and honestly, we should have all seen this coming. In the interest of not swearing, because I'm pretty sure it goes against community guidelines, she's always been a huge female dog, and I'm glad that she'll soon be out of our lives for good. Oh, on that note, you'll be happy to know that Crystal will be on trial soon, along with her Jeff Colby, and Crystal's assistant will also be facing charges in the case. As usual, I can't actually say much in the interest of privacy and security, but just know that they're not going to have an easy run of it, and we've got a lot stacked against them. I'm looking forward to the day that they're all behind bars, while Carrington Atlantic reaches great, giant heights. Alright, so let's jump right into this story because the comment section was not very happy with OP's father. And the reason is, they're saying, you know what, it's ridiculous that OP had to jump to such hoops just to get to the point to present the evidence, which by the way was overwhelming. To OP's father, she had to go in front of all the employees, hand them out the pictures, just so the father would take a look at it. If the father would have just looked at those stupid pictures when she left it in his office on the chair, then all this could have been handled a lot easier. But that's not how it went down, so I want to know your thoughts on that. Do you think maybe OP's father was blinded by love? Or he definitely should have just had a look at these pictures? I want to know your thoughts about this story. It was a wild one, but at the end of the day, we know what happened and justice was served. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want daily videos, all you gotta do is hit that subscribe button. Thank you once again. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.